Okay, so effective questions. This is a subject that is really really important to me personally. I have found over the years our ability to ask effective questions has such an impact on not only the results but our experience. And very few of us actually really receive much formal training in asking questions and what does that entail and what are the different options available to ask questions and where do we often break down in when we're engaged in a conversation or a dialogue with somebody. And it often revolves around whether we've been able to ask effective questions or not to say necessarily the right questions, but certainly ones that help us better understand and get to the answers that we're looking for. So why is it important? Well, this is my grandson Everett. I'd be remiss if I did a presentation and I didn't have Everett in here. Poor Everett, he asked his mom, I would like to wear a hat today, and which one should I wear? And Alyssa gave Everett this hat. And now Everett is not looking very happy. In fact, he's dismayed because he knows that wearing this hat when he goes to the playground, the other kids are going to pick on him, and poor Everett doesn't want to get picked on. So he learned and he asked his grandmother, hey, what are all the cool kids wearing for a hat? And now he's wearing his polar bear hat. And so Everett, by the questions that we ask, we often get the answers that that kind of dictate, our questions will dictate the answers that we get. And so what we ask and how we ask has a significant impact on that. And built into the questions that we ask are the biases and assumptions that we hold. And we allow ourselves to be affected by those biases and assumptions. And we don't really understand why we didn't get all the information that we were seeking. And this permeates so many different areas. So for me, as an example, I've had advantages. I'm a tall white male. And in a 400-meter race, I started at the 200-meter mark. And other people, and with that comes some certain assumptions and biases that affects my worldview. And my worldview then starts to impact on how I ask questions and what I'm expecting to be the answers. And so we need to figure out ways that we check our biases, that we check our assumptions. And this is really where we need to be a lot of self-examination in what we're asking ourselves. So this session, what I'm hoping that we can get out of this session is more of a reminder for a lot of things that we already know, but also maybe being able to put into practice some of the things that we learned today. So the format that you're going to have today is I'm going to go through some examples of different questions and some of the elements that we need. Then you're going to do some role playing. It's the easiest role playing you will ever do. And I guarantee it, the easiest one that we'll ever do. And we're also going to do an activity around the 5 whys, and I'll talk about that a bit more. So we're going to do a couple of activities, but to set the stage for those activities, I want to go through some what I really am hoping we can achieve. And that is that I want you guys to be able to gain some understanding and grow your skills in asking questions that help establish understanding and clarity. Like I said, very few of us receive any formal training. And in fact, if you have received formal training, if you're one of the professions like law, or if you're in fact a scientist, you will have been trained to ask questions in a certain way that reflect your profession. And I want us to actually move into a mindset, one where it's about openness and really seeking to understand. So there's this a scientist and philosopher, Thomas Kuhn. He wrote a book about several decades ago called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. I love his quote, "The answers you get depend on the questions you ask." And the gist of his book, and just to kind of give you some context, the gist of his book was that in science and in academic research in general, most of the research builds on linear or incremental advancements in the body of knowledge for a specific field. And what Kuhn recognized is that it's actually the understanding or the seeking out of anomalies within a theory that results in paradigm shifts. And Kuhn is the individual who introduced the concept of paradigm shifts. And it's really the exploration of anomalies that can't be explained that result in a different perspective of how we see things. And that's really what is most important around this, is that so much of what we think and so much of what we believe is depending upon our perspective. And it's the shifting of our perspectives that's critical in how we're asking questions. If we approached everything as Socrates would want us to do, with that wisdom begins with wonder, it's all about our mindset. It's all about, are we seeking to prove what we already believe, or are we truly trying to understand and learn? And so for myself, what I tend to do is I try to check where my sources of information are coming from. I love following the news. I'm a news hound. I absorb way too much news to be healthy. But I try to make sure that my sources of news is from a broad spectrum. And so you're just as likely to find the Atlantic, me reading the Atlantic, as you would at The Economist or the Wall Street Journal, as you would watching or reading something on Fox News or the Globe and Mail. I try to absorb a broad spectrum to understand different points of view. And so if we were to approach how we ask questions, how we seek to understand, how we try to learn with a sense of wonder, then our likelihood of being able to gather information that we need, to be able to truly understand, becomes more likely. And so I'm going to do a little exercise here. We're going to see how this goes. I need a volunteer. I don't want to volunteer. If you know the answer to this, shut up. Don't say anything. If you don't know the answer to this, I need somebody to raise their hand or speak up and say, I will be willing to be the volunteer.
I can be the volunteer.
Awesome. Is that Chris?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Chris. I have walked into a hardware store. And what I can do is I can buy 6 for $6, 12 for $12, 24 for $12. You can ask me 10 yes or no questions. What am I buying?
Are you buying something used to fasten things together?
No.
Are you buying something that requires electricity?
No. This is really good. Keep going.
Are you buying something that you would fasten together with other things?
No. I'm gonna add to the clue. I can buy 48 for $12, and I can buy 96 for $12, but I can't buy 100 for $12.
Okay, so obviously it's multiples of 12 of some sort, or multiples of 6, I guess.
No. Now, how about I take the restrictions off of asking yes or no questions, and how about you ask me some open-ended questions now?
Okay.
You can ask anything you want, open-ended.
I mean, I would just start with asking, what are you buying? But
I am buying some numbers.
Ah.
And then we're from there.
So you're buying house numbers to put up on.
That's correct.
You're buying house numbers to put up on something. Okay.
Okay, cheer for Chris. Nice job, Chris. What did that feel like, Chris? And if it's all right if I ask you a couple of questions, what did that feel like, being restricted to the yes/no questions?
Very challenging, because I had to really think about how to phrase my question in order to get useful information out of it.
Mm-hmm. And when you, one of the things, how hard were you trying to guess what I really was buying?
Like through the yes no questions.
Yes.
And every response, I spent a lot of time thinking about thinking about what it would relate to for what you're buying.
And
So
so, yeah, nice job here, Chris, because one of the things that this exercise really highlights is not only the limitations of being able to ask, I really appreciate you doing this, Chris, because it's just, how much fun is that to go through that exercise in front of 100 or so people. But what I loved about that exercise is that it's really showing the limitations of yes, no questions. But when you think about it, how often do we ask yes, no questions? How often do you look at trying to understand what is taking place, and embedded within your questions are often the yes or no? And so when we look at this, when we ask ourselves, how do we check our biases and assumptions? You can start with, how are you even asking the question? Have you already drawn a conclusion? What's the internal conversation that you have going on as you are asking your questions? Are your questions really about understanding and confirm what you believe? Or does it have more to do with that you really are moving with a sense of wonder? So know your motives for your questions, and then try to really understand what lens you're looking through when you're asking questions. If you're really trying to understand, you're really looking through that lens of being in the shoes of the other person. And so when we're asking these closed-ended questions, they limit the amount of information we can get. But how freeing is it when you can move right into an open-ended question? And that way you can start to garner a lot more information. Now, just on a practical sense, there are a series of different types of questions that are available to us. And I'm going to go through some of these fairly quickly here, but some I highly recommend, others are used, but we probably want to consider shying away from. But if you think about it, the foundation of effective questions is really about open-ended questions. And open-ended questions tend to be the 5 W's and then sometimes how. And if you think about what a news article will have at the beginning, it's who, what, why, where, and when, and sometimes how. Open-ended questions really allow the respondent to give you what is on their mind and you an opportunity to get a glimpse into that and then start to build a series of questions around that. We did an example with the closed-ended questions, but we use these in the way that we think sometimes that we're using open-ended questions. So for example, if somebody said to you, did you get the result you expected? If I'm talking to a buddy of mine, he's already working from the angle that I know that he was in a race, and I am assuming that he is just going to share information with me, even though I've asked a closed-ended question. But if I had asked the question in such a way as, how did the race go? Then I would be able to get a glimpse into emotion, the actual result itself, what really mattered to my friend about the type of race. Maybe my friend didn't care about coming in first, second, or third. Maybe my friend just wanted to participate in, and that was the goal in itself. And so if I ask the closed-ended question, even though in our society, people will expand on the answer, they will in many ways start to frame the answer around the question that you've asked, which is not necessarily really giving you the true picture or the overall picture. We can use probing questions, and this is very similar to the utilization of open questions. You're asking for an expansion on a comment or an idea. This is really where if I build on going on to the results of the race, how did the race go? It went excellent. Oh, it went excellent. Why? What was excellent about it? And that would be in essence of a probing question. I'm trying to get the feeling and the meaning and the emotion behind the answer to really understand what it all means. We sometimes use leading questions, and this is something that I would strongly encourage you to. I do this all the time, and I get annoyed with myself for doing this. I go down this path of, you already have an idea of and want to take this person down that path. You know, an example of this, if you ask someone, do you have any problems with your team lead? Now think about that question. Do you have any problems with your team lead? yes or no. And built into it is an assumption that you have problems with your team lead. And maybe a more effective approach could be, how is your relationship with your team lead? So I'm not building in any assumptions into my question at that point. Instead of leading the person I'm talking with, I am actually really trying to understand, how is that relationship? Sometimes we use loaded questions, have you stopped cheating on your taxes? Very similar to leading questions. Well, that too is also embedded within that. It's an assumption that you're cheating on your taxes. And of course, we don't want to go down that path, and we want to avoid those manipulative or guided questions that leading and loaded questions can sometimes result in. You can also look at a funnel, a series of questions. That's when you can start with a very broad subject. What was the weather like in Cancun? And then from there, you can work it all the way down to, well, that sounds like it was amazing. What did you do while you were there when the weather was so amazing and so excellent? And you can start to funnel down to funnel down into a specific topic itself. But you're starting broad and working down. Sometimes you need to use recall questions where you just want to set the context and perspective. Sometimes you just want to know what the details are. And a recall type of question can assist with that. Process questions where we seek to understand what steps were taken or what steps need to be taken. Very similar to the open-ended question, but that's really you're really trying to understand how to share your screen effectively. Would be an example of, maybe I should have asked more effective process questions to Aaron. But process questions are really about understanding those steps, and you still utilize open-ended format in order to get the answers that you're looking for. There's also rhetorical questions, and rhetorical is when you're just trying to make a point, or you're trying to stress something for effect. And did the bear take a dump in the woods? Of course, the bear took a shot in the woods. Why do you think we need the woods? We can't have bears taking dumps in the street, can we? That's why we need to protect the forest. So you're doing something. I don't know why I use that example. That was a terrible example. Just so note to self: don't use bear dumping as an example in presentations. But it's to stress an effect. I'm trying to get to a spot. We should protect our forests. And so you can ask a question, not necessarily expecting an answer, but it elicits responses. So these are the different forms of questions that we have available to us. I'm just going to check with the group. Is there any questions related to these styles of questions? I'm just checking the chat, or you can.
I've got a question.
Yeah, fire away, Vic.
If somebody is on the receiving end of a leading question, how might they recognize it?
First off, check your own emotions when you're answering the question. Are you feeling uncomfortable with something? Are you looking, or is somebody trying to? One of my favorites that I often do is I get asked either/or questions a lot, and so an example of an either/or could be, are you interested in lunch or golf this week? And I'm like, well, yes, I want both. You give me false alternatives. Those things are mutually exclusive. I could do both of those things with you. I actually want to do both of those things with you. So either/or questions are often leading in nature. It's where people are putting parameters on you to say, here's your two choices, select one. You may want both, you may want neither. You may have a better idea of what the alternatives could be. And so you can recognize it when you're feeling like that emotion's coming up about, well, wait a second, I'm going to answer this question, but is this really what we want to be talking about? How does that help, Vic? That's
a fantastic answer. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick one. Do you feel like, you just said that you're digesting lots of media? Do you feel currently in the media space we have lots of leading questions, lots of rhetorical questions that are just kind of cherry picking, like almost like forming an answer to fit the agenda in a way?
Yes. So I do think that's happening. I do think that the quality of our journalism, and I'm not going to go too far down this path, but I have strong opinions on it. I do believe that our quality of our journalism has been somewhat wanting over the past number of years, that it has been declining. And I think it's a function of what's taken place within the news media industry. It's been disrupted substantially. And our sources of information, right down to the local level, has been diminished. And then what is now being sold for media eyeballs is no longer classified ads driving, or general advertising driving the revenues, but it's actually subscriptions that has to cater to a market segment, which then has to be fed with information that will reinforce biases that already exist. So I strongly believe that our news media is really heading down an unhealthy path, and that will have a significant impact on us as a society. Our ability to be informed, and when we're making important decisions at the polling booth, right to holding elected officials accountable. And I think it also feeds the bipartisanship that's so unhealthy today. And that's in Canada and the US. So I appreciate the question. Boy, I love this topic too, Alan. I actually like just really chatting with Alan. He is an amazing conversationalist. If you have a chance, have coffee with Alan. He asks great questions. So one of the things about when we're in the midst of asking questions, I'm gonna pick on. I listen to the CBC, and there's an afternoon host on the CBC radio station here who has a checklist of questions that he asks and doesn't really listen to the answers that are being given. He's just trying to get through his list of questions. It drives me insane, because it's like very interesting things that could be explored are being completely missed because the person's trying to go through a checklist. How many of you have been in an interview and you can really tell that the person is not listening to your answers? They're just going through a list of questions, and then they can say they answered the questions. Effective questions depends on the ability to establish a flow. And the flow is building on the previous answer. In order to build on the previous answer, it requires engaged listening. It also requires more than just asking questions, but showing that you have heard what the other person is saying. And using examples of, when you said that, it made me think of, or when you said that, did you also mean, and you're getting clarification. And then what happens with that is that you can start to build a dialogue. And you will find that the more questions that you're asking and then showing that you understand, the level of engagement and the ability to truly understand increases exponentially. So it's about flow. And flow means that you're really listening to the other person and then showing that you have heard them. So what does active listening look like? And by the way, Tracy's got a full session coming up on talk so people listen, and listen so people will talk. And it's excellent, and it's really about effective listening. But I'm going to touch on some stuff here just very, very briefly. What does active listening look and feel like? So this is a picture. We're in Barcelona. I love Barcelona. Love Spain. Spain's best. Spain's awesome. Want to go to Spain again, like now. And this is Karen and her buddy Annette. And these two are exceptional listeners, especially when you think that what Karen has to put up with, where I only verbalize half my thought. And then she's got to figure out from there what the other half is. And I will think, what I already said it all, but I've only actually said half of it. These two are probably laughing at Kaz and I about something, and I'm not sure what it is. But if you look at the body language here, and if you look at the emotions, Annette's leaning in, she's smiling, there's eye contact, there's respect, the empathy about the other person matters, there's an openness. Effective or active listening involves a patience, which is a challenge for me because I often want to finish the person's answer, and stopping myself from interrupting is a difficult thing to do that so many of us do. Patience, utilizing paraphrasing to show that you understand, but then it's that engaged positive body language. These elements are so critical to effective listening. And if you find yourself asking questions and not really sure what the other person was saying, pause And am I really respecting this person? Am I empathizing, and am I showing that they matter? How open am I to the answers? Am I being patient? Wait a second, have I paraphrased any of their answers to show that I was really listening, or did I just start talking about what I wanted to talk about? So effective listening also, and flow within a conversation is also dependent on, if you looked at this photo, you would say that we look lost. We're not lost. Ron is not looking, where are we? This is, but I love this photo because it just, here we are we were in a planning meeting retreat, and then I look over and we're staring in different directions, looking all sort of confused. And so when we are engaged in a flow, when we're engaged in a conversation, we need to pay attention to the nonverbal cues, the nodding, the smiling, the eye contact, what tone is being used, and how many of you use the power of silence when you're in a conversation and trying to get information. Is that when you've asked a question and the person has answered it, and you just patiently wait because you know there's more coming. And instead of trying to fill the silence, you actually let the other person formulate their thoughts. And then don't underestimate the power of pencil or a keyboard and being able to record what the person's talking about so that you can come back to certain points. So when you recap here, we have different types of questions that we can ask, but open-ended is the foundation. We need to have nonverbal cues in place to show that we are engaged in listening. We need to pay attention to our own biases and assumptions that we have built into the conversation, and how do we keep those in check. So we're gonna do an activity, and we're gonna divide you guys up into pairs. But before we do that, this is what we're gonna do. With a partner, you're gonna conduct a one-on-one meeting. Let's say you're a brand new team lead, and this, by the way, this is the easiest role playing you'll ever do, because it shouldn't feel like role playing. This is just actually having a conversation with someone. You're going to be in a one-on-one meeting, and you're going to utilize some of the questioning techniques that we've just explored so you can better understand their work priorities, their challenges and opportunities that they have. You are a brand new team lead for this person. And I want you to ask questions and show that you're engaged in the answers and build upon it, so that when you are done at the end of the 6 minutes, each 6 minutes, then you're gonna show that you have a true understanding of what that person's priorities are, challenges, what they're working on, and then you're gonna reverse. And I'm using 6 minutes. That may seem like an eternity. It shouldn't. I have one of the things I loved about my role, and that I've been able to do over the years, is that I've been able to go to office to office to office and sit down with IQers, and then this is prior to when we had COVID and ready, and sit down with IQers and learn about what they do. And it afforded me the opportunity to get a broad perspective of the state of the business, what was working, what wasn't working. And there's so many areas that I didn't know what exactly groups were working on, but by in a one-on-one meeting with someone, we're just asking questions and listening. It was amazing how much I could learn about what was taking place. And so effective team lead is really dependent upon the ability to ask questions. And so we're going to do this activity, 6 minutes each. I want you to ask questions to understand. And then at the end of the 6 minutes, Erin's going to work the timer and notify you, however she does that. And which I have no clue how to do, so hopefully this will work. It's a good thing Erin's here. And then you're going to get into that conversation with the other person, 6 minutes each, and then we're going to reconvene and we're going to talk about what worked, what didn't work, what surprised you about the exercise, what did you learn about yourself. One last thing, for those of you that are shy like me, and some of you may be surprised, I'm actually a very shy person, and I hate networking, and I hate going into environments where there's small talk. But what I learned was that if I could ask questions and the other person speaks, it made it so much easier for me to be in those environments. And so as a shy person who really doesn't want to go into meeting new people because of all the fears and hangups and insecurities I've got, but utilizing questions, I learned was a way for me to be able to engage with others that helped me get more comfortable, and then resulting in that other person that I'm talking to could see that I really cared and was interested in what they had to say. And then from there, a dialogue would develop. So I want you to try this. We're going to go into split. Aaron, if you could split people up now, then we'll start the timer, 6 minutes each, and then we'll reconvene. Okay, what was that like? What went really well?
It was awkward at first, 100%. But then once you got past that awkwardness, it made you think more about the questions and the conversations, and I was there. I wasn't just in a meeting. It was good.
That's awesome. Thanks, Michelle. What else? What went well?
Well, definitely, I got to learn way more from how things work in the data centers and everything like that. Like the questions were leading on the answers, and yeah, it was very fluid. I didn't even think that I was asking questions.
Well, that is the best. When you've got to that moment, you're not even realizing you're just in the flow of the conversation, and you're getting that much information. That's so cool. That's awesome. Thanks, Gabe.
Yeah, it was actually short.
Yep.
It was definitely short. 6
Too
minutes
short?
is not, yeah, 6 minutes was not enough.
You need more of a runway to get that plane off the ground.
I found that sorry, you muted me. I found that I had more questions and I didn't want the session to end, which is weird for me because I feel like I'm also one of those shy people that is awkward and doesn't like it, but it flowed really well, I think.
Cool.
It was a good experience.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. What did you learn about yourself in this process?
I think one thing I noticed right away was that having the dedicated, this person's asking question right now, like this time is for this person to ask the questions and then the other person respond, and then this time is for that to flip. It helped because I feel like I have a tendency to try and start dominating conversations.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that is something that's quite common to a lot of us. We get into the train tracks of something that we want or to communicate, and it's no longer a dialogue. It's morphs into a monologue of some sort. What? Who else? What else did you learn about yourself in this?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I had a lot of questions I realized for the person I was paired up with. And we've talked before, and they never tend to come up because when we talk, it is more of a mutual interest dialogue that just kind of comes up as casual conversation, or kind of having the opportunity to probe and kind of let us each down our own path around asking questions, which I think we probably both got value out of doing that. And again, too short.
Too short. Okay. Oh, hey, this is awesome. I'm so glad you guys were able to gain some practice in asking the questions. All of you know how to do this. And so much of it has to do with just reminding ourselves the way we're approaching the interaction, the dialogue that we're having with someone. So thank you for doing that. And I'm going to, my screen. Okay, 5 whys in action. So many of you that have been involved in root cause analysis or may be familiar with an approach of challenging or solving or understanding a problem. And it's the 5 whys methodology. And basically what it gets at is this. It's a very simple tool, is that you need to usually ask why 5 times to really get the root cause of a problem or what the opportunity is. And so an example would be, you were late for work. Well, why were you late for work? You were caught speeding. Why were you caught for speeding? Well, I woke up late. Well, why did you wake up late? The alarm on my phone didn't work. Well, why didn't the phone work? Well, it wasn't charged. Why wasn't it charged? Well, the stupid freaking cat chewed the charger cable. Okay, so get a wireless charger or get rid of the cat. Get a dog. Much more reliable. Get a dog. And so the 5 whys is really all about drilling down into the core issue itself. So if we just leave it, isn't he cute? He's a cute kid. I don't know. He's a cute kid. I don't know. Got all of Karen's and then Alyssa's and Brandon's genes and escaped the McGillivray side, which is really good. If you look at this of the 5 whys, it's a simple tool, but often we just will stop when we get to the 3rd why, thinking, oh, I'm late for work because my alarm didn't go off. But we don't really get to the root cause of problems. And this is something that we have been guilty of in iQmetrix, where we haven't drilled down deep enough to why something is happening, truly understanding it. And it's because it's a tough exercise to go through. And so we are going to, Sid. I forgot I had Sid in here. I like dogs. I like kids. This is Joel's dog, Sid. I'm very fond of Sid. He's looking out my office window, wondering where Joel is when I'm dog sitting. So we're gonna do a 5 whys exercise. We should only have one dog photo. You can have multiple baby photos, but you should only have one dog photo in a presentation. Pro tip. The 5 whys exercise. So we're gonna get into groups of 5. And in that group of 5, what I want you to do is pick an issue that should be analyzed. Draw from the conversations that you just had. Now you're going to need to pick something that is somewhat in your purview, something that you understand, something that's related within your group. And it is probably going to be related to something around the employee experience. It doesn't have to be limited to that. It could be a customer experience. It could be a product development experience. It could be any number of things. But in your group of 5, what I want you to do is brainstorm about different problems or opportunities or tensions that we have within the business. I want you to brainstorm, get some of them written down, and then narrow it down to one topic. And then I want the 5 of you in your group to go through the 5 whys exercise. Now you're not going to get all the way through, and you won't necessarily have all the information. I just want you to try to practice this to see how effective it can be in assisting in getting down to the root cause of a problem. And utilizing why, the word why is the most powerful word when we can ask questions. And it's a tool that's so easy for us to use. So we're going to get you broken up into groups of 5. And I want you to spend around 5-ish minutes on coming up with a topic, and then 7-ish minutes. So that's a total of 12-ish minutes that you'll have to do the 5 whys exercise. So Aaron's going to break you up into groups of 5. In your group, you'll brainstorm about problems, tensions, or opportunities within iQmetrix, Ready, or Cova. You are then going to decide on which one you want to explore as a group and utilize the 5 whys. So start with your problem. Why do we have that problem? Write it down. Why is that contributing to the problem? Write it down. And keep drilling down through the 5 whys. It's going to take some practice to get good at this, and that's why we're going to do it in this session, so we can have a run through, and then we're going to come back as a group, and we're going to talk about how it worked, where it was challenging, and we're going to share that information so that we can learn from each other. So Aaron, if you could break everybody up for 12 minutes, and then we will reconvene after that.
Oh my gosh, that was fun.
Yeah, we were in a great conversation, and I don't know if we got 12 minutes.
I don't think we did either.
It didn't feel like 12 minutes, did it?
Yeah, Aaron ripped us off again.
Yeah, it's all my fault. I'm so sorry, you guys. I did it right.
To buy her a timer. Make sure you put those comments in the survey.
You know, I was stuck in here with the room with Scott, so I was just like, we got to get this done. It's time for everybody to be done. I need other people back here.
I love that language. I was stuck.
Yeah, I was stuck with Scott.
What was that? What was that like? What did you guys learn from this? What was it like?
Well, I can say something. I had like really great group, and that shared some of the like really some burning issues. But I think at the end, closer to the end, I think we started to realize there's just it's not something that like we are feeling the effects of the overall market. You know, something's happening in the market that is really having like trickle down effects on companies like us, and for us, obviously, it's a burning issue. So, like it feels to me like that's exactly root cause analysis that you can get there, and it's a very like sort of deep system issue, and even if you cannot like fix it from the bottom up, like the deep awareness where it's coming from, and maybe it can cause even more damage, is very, very important rather than staying on a sort of surface level issues. So that was my impression.
Awesome. Great. That's fantastic to hear, Alan. Thank you. Others?
Yeah. One of the things I noticed is that each why we drilled into seemed to have a lot of branching possibilities that we could have gone off onto. But of course, we only had a limited amount of time to drill down. And so choosing which one to drill down onto, because a lot of them seem to pop up and be obvious. It's like, well, the answer to this leads us to some whys, but the answer actually had a couple different, this and this and this. Each one of those we could have drilled into. And so I would have loved to explore it all, but of course, we, only have so much time. And that's not just constrained in the exercise. I think that's a reality in life. You only have so much time for so many questions. So I found that thinking about how to choose that next why was kind of on my mind throughout the whole thing.
That's awesome. Thank you, Andrew. It's Aaron's fault that it's 12 minutes, not me. Totally throw her under the bus. Who else? What else did you guys learn?
I was surprised to see how often the ideas that everybody had from so many areas were all very similar, and they all kind of connected together. And when we started asking the why, the more and more we got to connect them all to kind of one main issue. But it was interesting to see that perspective from so many different people in the organization, that we're all facing similar items. So
yes, okay, yeah, that's it's interesting when you're doing that analysis, isn't it, Michelle, where you can find the connection between the various problems. And I think what you're highlighting here so well is that the definition of the problem itself is the critical component, right? It is really, if you have properly defined the problem, which involves such an extensive amount of questions just to get to that. So if you can actually get to a meaningful problem definition, that's in itself is a major accomplishment. And then going through the exercise of the 5 whys can result in such a clarity around, oh, this is what we need to deal with. So I'm curious, how many people are going to utilize this with their teams? Oh, cool, awesome.
I actually think that this will help me personally too, because as I was going through some of those whys, I realized that some of the conversations I might have been having with my lead were more about that surface level and not like into a deeper level of what would actually help me to, ease some of those feelings. So I thought that was helpful.
Okay, that's a major win. Like, that's huge. That's great to hear. Thanks, Kristen.
Well, I think it tied really well with Jeff's presentation yesterday, when you can focus easily on the symptom instead of the problem, because all of those initial things they're just symptoms. The first question is not the problem. You have to drill down to the problem, and you realize that solving that first thing is not actually going to get you to where you need to go until you drill down with the why.
I think it tied really well into Clayton's presentation from Monday, where he was describing tensions versus proposals, because this is really trying to get at the tension rather than the reflexive response to a problem. But also I found it really interesting how any question we asked, it was the same question and I had an answer, but then the other people had different answers. So it just showed how complex it is when you get a group of people together and they all look at the same thing and see something different.
Oh, this is, that Clayton guy is quite amazing, isn't he? He's genius. Thanks for bringing that up, Clayton. It's so true. It is all about getting down to that tension, and then being able to. It is the diversity of opinions as well and perspectives that's so important. So I love that. Thank you. Any other comments? Any frustrations with the 5 whys?
I don't know that I was frustrated, but when we got to like the 5th question, it seemed to be very branching. Like you could ask many 5th whys, and each one could be kind of closer to a root cause. And maybe that's the reality. There's lots of root causes, but
yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, the tool is meant to help get to a root cause, and I can't remember who said it earlier, but Andrew said it. It creates so many other things that need to be explored. It's synthesizing those into the proper, as Michelle was getting at, the proper problem definition. it's okay to park some things for further exploration and keeping on track. I encourage you to utilize this as a tool with your team. When you're finding yourself, there's a tension, there's a problem, there's an opportunity, and you want to explore it, this is a very simple tool that you can use in order to do that. We're just coming into the close here, and I want to close with a challenge. And the challenge that I want to put to you guys is this: is that today, not tomorrow, but today, have a conversation where you are focused on understanding what is important to someone else in that moment. What happened, and start with, it could be so simple as start with what happened in their day. Take the initiative to reach out to someone, a colleague, friend, family member, anyone. Take the risk and then talk with them, but truly talk in a conversation where you're asking questions to understand, so you get the feeling, the emotion behind it, and you can explore ideas, you can garner a deeper understanding of what that person is facing or what opportunities they have. So I challenge you to do that today, and see what you learn about yourself and how you ask questions and how you can learn more about yourself. Work on that effective listening. We've got that session coming up in the next day or so that Tracy's going to be doing on, that I mentioned earlier. But I am going to close off. What's so weird for the virtual, I have no freaking idea how to close this off. It's like, in real world, you could just say, okay, that's great, break. So the only way I'm going to close this off is that I really appreciate your attention and engagement. Sid and I think you guys are awesome. And this is one of my selfies that I'll have to send to Cole so he can use in the future. That's all you get for the selfie. Too many dog pictures in the presentation. So thanks everyone. You guys have a great rest of the day. Just a reminder, we've got Andrew Fergus coming up on design thinking, and it's going to be a really cool session. And I strongly encourage you to block off the time to be there. So thanks again. Have a great day. Talk to you guys later. Bye now.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Scott.